Hello? Testing, testing, 1, 2. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, welcome. I'm so excited to see you all here today. Welcome to the Knowledge Platform Security and Rule of Law annual conference. This is our 10th annual conference, and I'm just really excited to see some of you here in person. At some point today, there will be 150 of you here. I think there are some issues with public transport, and some people are also just going to be joining as the morning proceeds. But because it's a hybrid event, we're also joined by more than 350 people online today. They're joining us right now, actually, in this opening plenary. And they're joining us from over 75 different countries, which I find unbelievable and I'm so excited about. And it's also very important to make sure that we have a whole diverse range of perspectives represented at our conference today. I'm going to give you just a quick run through of the program, a bit of housekeeping, and then we're going to kick off with our opening discussion. So if you could please humor me, I think it would be really interesting to get a sense for who's in the room today. We've got some newcomers. We've got some people who I've definitely seen here before. So if you could scan this QR code or go to menti.com and type in this voting code. My colleague in a moment will leave this up here for like a minute and get a sense for who's new, and then we'll also get a sense for how familiar you are with the thematic headline this year. All right, maybe Francesca, we can start to show the results on stage. Okay, honestly looks like a pretty even balance of newcomers and familiar faces. We'd really like to welcome those who are new to the Knowledge Platform, who have never heard of us before. We're really happy that you're here. The next question is, how familiar are you with the thematic focus? The social contract, given it's our 10th conference, we've had a whole range of thematic headlines. This year's is one that's a little bit more complicated, but one that we're really excited about. So I'm curious if you heard of it once, maybe in a political science class, or if this is something that you work with on a daily basis, or perhaps you work with it on a daily basis but don't label it as such. It looks like a lot of people here are familiar with it, so maybe you read our concept note. But great, if we could get back to the PowerPoint. I just wanted to introduce the program. I'm not going to unpack what the social contract means right now, but we've got 17 sessions today that will. Just so you know what's accessible to you here in person, we've got 2 rooms here at the Laumann Museum. You'll notice that each of the rooms are named after cars. So in the Ford room and in the Crosby room, all of you can attend the sessions in person, as well as right here in the Toyota room. This is the hybrid room. So this room is also accessible. Everything happening in this room is accessible to you online. I'm going to look at the camera here like they do in the newsrooms. And we also have 2 dedicated columns of our program that are accessible to everyone here in person and online. So hopefully you've all brought your laptops here today and your headphones so that you can join in on the webinars. You can also access the webinars if you download the app. Quick floor plan. We're here. The library, which is a spillover room. If you brought your laptop and you need a quiet space to tunnel in and join a webinar, it's on the other side of this great hall. You can also join those webinars from the great hall. And then on this side, we have Toyota, the hybrid room. Upstairs, we have Ford, which is also for in-person sessions. If you haven't downloaded the app already, I highly recommend it because it's a great way that we can bridge those of you who are here today and those of you who are online. It's also got cool interactive features like a DM, so you can keep in touch with people that you meet throughout the course of the day. It also hyperlinks to their LinkedIn and Twitter and all of that. So if you go to the Google Play Store or the App Store and download it and type in KPAC22, you'll then be prompted to add your PIN number, which you were emailed. And yeah, I think a lot of sessions throughout the day are utilizing the Q&A function via the app. So highly recommend that you do so. Throughout the course of the day, if you also want to tweet at us or post about us on LinkedIn, we'd like you to use the hashtag KPAC22. That way, after the conference, we can just see all of the social media posts related to the conference in one place. I don't want to take up too much more time. We have a really interesting keynote discussion, and they're going to unpack a little bit about what social contracts means in their work focused on youth, peace, and security. My colleague Sever Jikutsky, I'd like to welcome to the stage. He's our new head of secretariat who joined us earlier this year, who will more thoroughly introduce our keynote discussion. So please help me in welcoming Sever.
I've got this. Yeah, thanks, Melissa. And Without Melissa, there would be no show today. So please actually, yeah, thank Melissa. Thank you so much. Greetings and warm welcome once again. It's really exciting to have you all here in the room and online around the world. This is one of the most exciting days for KPSRL in the year. And even more exciting is make the conversation we are going to have. So this conference traditionally started with keynote speech. And we had a lot of reflections on how we should do it. And is the speech reinforcing the hierarchy of knowledges? Is it in line with what we are really wanting to, how we are wanting to contribute to the sector? And then, but still, it is important to set the tone. It is important to set the tone of how they should unfold. And, but we want to set a tone that is about frank conversations, critical reflections, and engagement. So we set it as a conversation. And then we started reaching out to community to see who could engage in the conversation, what would be interesting perspectives, who are exciting people, who are inspiring people in the community. And that led us to 3 incredible persons who I'm really, really excited to welcome today on stage. And they have very distinct experiences and perspectives and geographical and thematic engagements. But at the same time, there is some common thread that connects them. And you'll also witness and experience some excitement, engagement, and that thread. I would maybe emphasize the fact that they were all, in one way or another, contributing to peace, that they've been all, in various ways, creatively reimagining approaches, reimagining structures, reimagining concepts, reimagining how we think and do peace, and who we involve in these processes. And I will introduce them and invite to the stage in order of how we got to engage them. So first, the welcome together with me, Vera Al-Mawla. Yeah.
Thank you.
Welcome,
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah.
Greatly appreciated.
Here.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, so Vera, maybe just for the beginning, could you just shortly tell us who you are, what you do?
Thank you so much. First of all, I'm very honored to be here among you. Thank you so much for making this happen. My name is Vera Al-Mawla, president and co-founder of Piece of Art organization based in Lebanon. Piece of Art was founded in 2016 by Mr. Mahdi Yahya in a very deprived and very neglected area called north of Biqa. The idea was to create a safe space, an open space for everyone, to come together, start dialogue, start meeting each other in a very difficult and this divided area, with the idea of bridging these communities together, regardless of the background, religious, nationalities, backgrounds related to beliefs and areas youth are coming from. So we are an arts-based organization, and the idea was to use arts as a tool for bringing youth together into this open and neutral space. So very happy to be here, very excited to be part of this discussion and conversation, and looking forward also to hear from our colleagues as well during this day. Thank you.
Yeah. It's great to have you here. Thanks for coming all over.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Thanks. Then I would like to introduce Moe Sasaki, who we also reached through our community. Good. Thanks. Welcome, Moe.
Thank you. Thank you.
Would you introduce yourself to?
Yes, it's my pleasure to be here, especially with my fellow panelists, who I'm very much humbled to be sitting next to. My name is Moe Sasaki, and I'm with the Northeast Asia Regional Peacebuilding Institute, among other amazing peacebuilding organizations in the region and internationally. The work that we do at NARPI, which is the short for Northeast Asia Regional Peacebuilding Institute, is we are trying to really recreate the culture that we have in Northeast Asia to build a culture of peace. Northeast Asia, while experiencing a time of relative peace, is still very much carrying the historical conflict, the trauma, the intergenerational trauma of our region. And this is often fanned when we have politicians who would like to use this to mobilize and to really forward securitization or militarism. And so we're trying to really combat that through empowering everyday people, educators, students, professors, to really think about what is our region and what is peace look like for our region. And so a lot of the work that we do revolves around reimagining who we are as citizens and reimagining what peace means for our region. And so I'm very much excited to be discussing this topic here. Just a little bit about myself. I kind of came into this world of peace building from a different angle. I grew up in Rwanda in the early 2000s as a child, and so really seeing grassroots reconciliation efforts by everyday people in communities, and really being inspired by that and wanting to kind of bring in that agency of people into Northeast Asia, where is my nationality, and really trying to kind of bring that communal aspect into the work that we do. And so I hope that I can kind of share from this personal passion and also the work that I do through the many organizations I've had the chance of working with. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Moe. Amazing to have you here. Thanks for coming over. And last but not least, our very own and beloved advisory committee member, Graeme Simpson. Welcome, Graeme.
It's amazing to be here again. Thank you very much. My name is Graeme Simpson. I'm the principal representative of Interpeace in New York and senior peacebuilding advisor. I'm the old white guy on the panel, but I want you to know that I cut my teeth as a student leader in the anti-apartheid movement, which both ages me and gives me certain credentials. My organization is a peacebuilding organization working globally. I was also very fortunate to be appointed by the Secretary General as the lead author of the progress study on youth, peace and security under Security Council Resolution 2250, which gave me the privilege of spending 2 years listening to young people, being inspired by them. And I always say to people that whilst you were all getting older, I spent 2 years getting younger. My organization is very invested in the issues of inclusion as absolutely critical to the social contract and to reimagining it. And this work with young people has been absolutely central to that. We are also very concerned that in thinking about this, we are constantly thinking about how we build trust between both citizens and the state, and between young people and their governments, but also horizontally within society. And really important for us that the social contract and rethinking it is both about those relationships vertically in society and the social fabric that we need to restitch between communities in conflict-affected societies. And of course, at the heart of that is a real investment in and belief in the critical issues of young people as vital to rethinking the social contract, as regenerating new ideas, as animating change to social movements.
Thank you, Graeme. Love to have you here and as part of this discussion. So already Moe and Graeme started touching upon how the work you are doing and what you're passionate about relates to reimagining social contracts. So that just to a bit strengthen that connection with the team, because that is what we are to unpack today, would you add something on like that connection, that relationship to the team?
Well, part of it is also usually starting to listen to the voices that are on the ground. I think this is very important, listening to the different voices that are coming from different regions, especially from the youth who are usually not able to reach platforms, university. So reimagining social contract, as my colleagues just said, it's very important to start from that ground, from the ground level, and kind of help it find its way to the higher levels, and start changing the conversation based on what the local identities shape it, and how they shape it. So I think this is part of the interesting thing about this conference itself is it's starting to bring such voices to the light, and I think this is how reimagining social contracts should be looking like, definitely. Yeah.
Great, thanks Vera. Any other comments or additions to the connection to the theme of your work or your passions, interests?
I would say, so looking at the role of young people in Northeast Asia and in peace building, I think social contracts come along with a lot of assumption that is unspoken about. And one of the things that I especially experience in Northeast Asia is the fact that peace and peace building is very much detached from young people. We are often seen as passive, we often see ourselves as passive, and so how do we kind of recreate and reimagine peace as something that really young people can be invested in? And this is also in a context where in Northeast Asia, open violence or open conflict is not something that is prevalent, and therefore oftentimes young people, and I think Graeme will talk about this later on, but young people are not even thought of as threats necessarily, they're just non-existent in the conversation. And so how do we start to reimagine peace and the dialogue around it so that young people can really start talking about it is one of the things that I think the work that I do is encouraging. And a big part of that is trying to also open the minds of ourselves, young people. And when we look at the region, not only thinking of it as an international relations issue or a politics issue, but really starting from hearing from the experiences of people in China, in Korea, in Mongolia, and hearing what are their experiences, what is their understanding of history, what is the kind of trauma that they still experience. And once we start really connecting and talking about this, we start to really open up our understanding of peace itself, of the lack of peace, and it opens up a new possibility, I think, and it starts that process of reimagining. And like Vera was saying, it really starts from the baseline of people coming together and changing what their assumptions have been of what peace can be. So, yeah.
Great, thanks. Just for a second to mention that you can also engage in this conversation by using the app, and that's why it was emphasized by Melissa. It's important to have it. And also for our online participants in the virtual venue where you're following this live stream, you can, in the Q&A section, leave your questions or comments, and we'll get to the point to engage you into this conversation. So just to give you heads up, an opportunity. Thanks. Graeme, would you add something in, or reflect into this?
I mean, we were talking to Moe earlier, and I'm really appreciative of the fact that she's talking about this from a very particular regional perspective and an understanding of that, because I think there's a really grave danger that we aggregate what we think the needs are of young people instead of listening to them and understanding their positioning in relation to these things in their communities and societies. One of the things that was really striking at the origins of the work that we were doing on youth, peace and security was a recognition of the trust deficit between young people and their governments, vertically, but also horizontally, the sort of sense of young people within their own communities and intergenerationally in terms of the kind of suspicion and anxiety about them. And very often stereotypes which were very gendered, which were animated by an image of a young man with a gun and the sort of notion of young men as threats and young women as consigned to the passive status of victimhood. And I think there's a very important gender dimension to this. And the thing about the sort of engaging the social contract issues through this is that this is not just about whether communities trust their young people and whether governments treat their young people as a threat. I think that the issues of mistrust have produced policy panic, which has often seen young people as the object of the exercise rather than investing in their creative resilience and resourcefulness. And I think we lose all of that animation and creativity of young people as agents of social change. So this isn't just about young people having a voice, it's about recognizing the agency and the leadership of young people. And I think one of the most important issues is also understanding legitimate mistrust, that young people are conscious of not wanting to be part of, included in systems of patronage or political manipulation or corrupt environments. And I think that this notion of trust has to be matched by the notion of trustworthiness as absolutely essential to the social contract.
Yeah, thanks for this, Graeme, because I think interesting raising the trust, but I would say not trust only. It's more complex than young people institutions, intergenerational. I believe we are engaged in a lot of issues related to trust between different communities across the border, or even within the same region, but divided, or trust in the sense of identities you're referring to. So just to kind of take a step back and see this trust and complexity of trust and layers of trust.
So true, so true.
Yeah.
Well, also to think about it also from the grounds level. Also, in many cases, youth, for example, if we're talking about north of Beqa in Lebanon, the idea is that youth have ideas, have potential, but at the same time, they don't have access to skills and the tools. So part of it is also providing resilience on that sense. Giving them leadership, giving them agency, providing the platforms and tools, because it's also part of these limitations that is building this kind of lack of engagement among the youth and with the policies and policy making levels, let's say. So trying to reimagine that is also, I think, very important. And working on that level is very important. One other point is also the ability to express. Well, this also connects to the same point, but means of expression is also sometimes very limiting for the youth. And in many cases, I think in our case, we're trying to use the art approach and the filmmaking, documentations, theater, music, as a way to help youth start voicing themselves in a environment that does not provide them with this tool, with this ability, let's say. So this is how marginalization starts, I think, when tools are not provided, when the dynamics are really closed and bordered and framed in such a way that youth cannot be really actively engaging in the systems and the institutions and on the ground levels as well. So this really also connects to the communications among the youth from the same community too. So
yeah,
I wanted to add.
Yeah. So I think it's something that adds the different elements, and not just opening spaces and giving opportunity, but then how we support people to meaningfully engage.
Absolutely.
And how then we use different approaches, different techniques in order to enable them to engage in line with their passions, capacities, interests.
So true,
Yeah,
so true.
yeah.
And
Right.
yeah, this also helps in project this voice even on a larger level.
Yeah, and I'm also so really pleased that you're emphasizing the agency and leadership, and then that individuals needed to have in order to really then meaningfully engage and in full support.
Which is both on personal, I think, and collective levels. Indeed. So.
Great. Thanks.
I just wanted to touch on the topic of trust that you mentioned. I think, especially as conflicts become wider and more political, an issue that we often face is that while actions of peace might be taking place, it doesn't. That action itself isn't trusted as legitimate or truthful, and something that I think really allows actions to match the core of, or the reasoning behind it would be for parties of different conflicts, or for example, in the case of Northeast Asia, dialogue between South Korean youth who is very much engaged in the, for example, comfort women issue, and then a Japanese student. I start to see a transformation when, for example, a Japanese student is able to expand their understanding, their positionality, their understanding of positionality, and transform their identity as a victim of, for example, World War II, and then start to understand, oh, actually, I'm also an aggressor in this history, in this region that I live in. And once that communication and that recognition is brought in, that's, I think, when grassroots trust building is really authentic and true. And from there, the actions that come from it have real strength, whether it be on the very, very community level or whether it can transcend a little bit higher. Because, for example, there's many examples of Korean politicians accepting compensation from Japan and local Korean citizens being very angry that they don't feel that that is just. And I believe that's because that grassroots dialogue and transformation and understanding of our identities hasn't happened. And so we need to really start connecting those two things to be able to bring about true transformation.
Great. Yeah, so this is super exciting discussion. I would just like to then maybe connect, because building on this, you wanted to step in?
Well, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's such an important dimension to this, which is there's a really grave danger, and the universality of young people's experience is really important here, because there's such a grave danger that we treat this as these questions of trust and trust building, the reimagining of the social contract, as if they're the exclusive concern of conflict-affected societies in the global south. And I think this will come up later in the conference, but the vital need to see what the consequences are of social contracts in reverse, the betrayal of people, the growing inequalities in society. I mean, young people were incredibly powerful in saying, this isn't just about formal civil and political rights. It's about our ability to trust economies that continue to exclude us. It's about gender-based patterns of marginalization and exclusion. It's about arenas like education, which are all about us, but in which we have no say in the design and recognition of these things. And these are not the exclusive concern of conflict-affected societies. These are, or in the global south, they're about societies that have failed to deal with their legacies of inequality, that have failed to incorporate and include youth and empower them, and that are, in many respects, starting to demonstrate the failures and limitations of representative democracy, which substitutes a once every 4 years participation for a much more active one. And so when we think about the innovation and creativity of young people in the occupation of the digital space, in the creative use of arts and alternative vehicles, we also, I think, need to see young people as the guardians of the future, as the animators of social movements around climate, around racial justice, around gender justice globally, because these acts of protest and dissent we often treat as the threat. And this is where the innovation is in young people's contribution to creative change.
Yeah, thanks. And we will also have several sessions throughout the day that will particularly dive into the role of social protests and the role of activists and the types of engagement in different parts of the world, but also particularly focusing on the northern western world, because we often think of that issues to be solved or problems to be addressed are elsewhere. And that importance of having that critical reflection on also our context and where we are embedded. And a bit in line with that, but also connected to some of the points you already raised, is you started mentioning like what is important to provide, like a safe space, like opportunities for engagement, but also given this positionality that we are sitting in the Netherlands, in a donor country, and many of in the room are engaged in processes elsewhere. There's also one of the questions from the audience thinking, how can external actors engaging in processes of society and community support? What are the meaningful ways of support that external actors coming to the context with all the good intentions, but sometimes not very well aware of the specificities of the context or the different dynamics? So what are your reflections on the meaningful ways of support?
Well, one part of it, apologies if I'm, thank you. One part of it is focusing on the local identities. In every context, especially in the Global South, local identities have their own values, their own characteristics, their own traits. So this should be basically part of any programming. Preserving these traditions, preserving these images, preserving the local identities of the youth, of the individuals in general, of the communities. Taking that into consideration with every programming is truly essential, because with let's say external programming, sometimes this is not taken into consideration, and this is in many cases challenging the local identities, challenging the ability of youth to express themselves in the way they actually are, and in the dynamics of the society itself. So focusing on this preservation is really important. That's just part of it.
Yeah.
I don't want not to take the whole conversation.
Any other thoughts, reflections on experience? Or?
I think especially when it comes to bringing in young people, a thing that I've seen over and over again is that the agenda is already set. The speaking points, the policies in which we need to speak to are already set. And that leaves very little room for young people to actually bring what they really want to talk about to the stage. And also the process in which we do that. An example would be, for example, I think the assumption for young people is that young people are to have strong opinions, speak loudly, speak truth to power. And this can work in some environments, maybe more in the West, but for example, in Northeast Asia, that's not necessarily a comfortable or a constructive way to speak. We are very aware of the generation and the relationships, intergenerationality that we have. So really thinking about what processes will be constructive and really speaking to young people and ask, how do you want to approach this? And making sure that the indexes and the way we monitor things and the way that we allocate funding really speak to that process that actually works for young people, I think is key. And that takes patience. So I encourage donors, supporters of these kind of processes to take a step back, have an open schedule for these things if possible, and to really put in the time to first understand what the process needs to be and how much time and what indexes we should be looking at when interacting with especially people from different cultures and social structures.
So, I mean, I think that there is such an important aspect of this, which is how the international community moves from a policy rhetoric about young people's meaningful inclusion to implementation and delivery. And it's so easy to check the box that we've consulted young people and then remarginalize young people in the implementation, in the design, implementation, and the assessment of success of these initiatives. And I think that there's really growing evidence that, whilst there are some incredibly creative processes of establishing youth action plans at the national level, etc., there are also really good indications that the youth, peace and security agenda is at risk of being reclaimed exclusively by governments and ministries who implement with young people marginal to the process of design and implementation. So I think that's the one issue. The second issue, and this is really about imagination, and I think is really relevant to this community of the knowledge management platform on security and rule of law. there was incredibly powerful illustrations by young people that we spoke to of how transformative a youth-centered or youth-led approach to DDR would be, where we see youth communities and youth organizations as the communities into which former combatants need to be reintegrated. It completely changes the way we think about these issues. Young people talk about the criminal justice system as entirely about them, so much oriented around young people and their deviance and their dysfunction. And yet they have very little say in security sector reform and criminal justice reform processes, and a youth-centered approach to that would, again, really fundamentally change it. The role of young people in peace processes is a fascinating example, and we look at the transitional justice field, and there's increasingly fabulous work about how forward-looking transitional justice would be if it was investing much more, not just in the experiences of young people as the objects of the exercise, but as animating its design and its future orientation. And I think there's so much room for us as a community to think about a youth-centered approach to reimagining all these dimensions.
Yeah, I think this also to some extent relates because you touched upon specificities. And there was also another question about to what extent it's the way authorities see young people, and when they take people, and in which topics they take young people seriously. To what extent that is like a cultural thing? So I think it also relates to what you were saying. In different regions, different cultures, they have different dynamics. Yeah, so I just thought it relates to one of the questions, so if you would add something to it, or I think it was already.
Well, this is, I think, part of the issue, because youth, for example, in the context of Lebanon, are not as engaged, and especially I'm talking about the more deprived zones, are not as engaged as they should be with the government, and the government is not taking usually the required, let's say, effort for that. So this definitely should be part of the programming, maybe pressuring more towards more engagement of the youth on the local levels. Let's start with that, and then building on that to reach more policy and decision-making levels. I think this has become a responsibility of the civic society in many cases, because of this maybe imbalanced situation. So I think, this is very crucial, trying to also push towards more engagement of youth, as Mr. Graeme has just said, especially in such contexts.
When we speak about culture, it's also a lot about language.
True.
And linking back, and there is one of the questions coming from audience, linking back to the thematic headline. I mean, social contracts is a term that we've been trying to unpack this whole year, and in very different ways, and yet we'll also have a session on Madaniya, and how then, if we try to translate them in different languages, it starts becoming more difficult. And then not only to translate it into language, but also the use of the term and the meanings around it. So since we are having a quite strong focus on like young people and how do we engage them, is in your experience this term close to them, clear? What are other ways to actually talk about and engage people into reimagining social contracts by perhaps maybe avoiding or using different terms, different approaches, different concepts? Yeah. So what would be the ways you think to translate, in a way, this concept?
I think the concept of social contracts is very Eurocentric. And to an extent, the way that we think of democracy can be quite, the assumption of democracy can be quite Eurocentric as well, in the sense that each individual as a characteristic, is expected to speak about their rights, to protect their own rights, to proclaim it as their right and fight for it. And this, while I truly believe in the power of that, can be quite distant from more, for example, Asian cultures, where the way that our society is built is through protection by our elders, by our community, and not necessarily being expected to have to proclaim your own right, because it is an assumption that society will also be part of your protection. And so if thinking a bit from a more kind of Eastern Asian perspective, it may be more about what are your, obligations, what are your responsibilities, given that you are in a communal society. And oftentimes, for young people, that also speaks to what are your obligations and responsibilities to your elders, who, for example, in my context, are the ones who have experienced war, etc., etc. So I think maybe speaking in those terms, in a way that doesn't suppress young people with obligation and more pressure of changing the world, might speak more naturally, instead of this idea of demanding our rights or demanding our place in society. Speaking at it from a more communal, intergenerational structure might speak. Yeah, it might be more natural.
I mean, I think this is so important, and I think that it's also about what I sort of suggested earlier, that it's really dangerous for us to adopt an approach to social contract, and I think it's embedded in some of the historical work on this, which is so state-centric and which is so focused on a set of relationships between state and society that are about the obligations of society and not enough about the accountability and trustworthiness of states on the one hand. But even more importantly, if we don't see the social contract as something that is about rights respecting communities, the relationship building between communities. I mean, I think this is such a powerful arena in which the issues of justice and human rights intersect so creatively with the issues of building peace and durable relationships. I think that this is really about understanding social contract as much as horizontal as it is vertical in society, and I think that's very important because it starts to change the way we think about this. So for young people, this is about intergenerational relationships and not just about state-society relationships. It's about intergenerational co-creation. That doesn't mean that we don't need to take very seriously the meaningful participation of young people in civil and political spaces, and not just by voting. The kind of too young to run campaign is very much about saying young people are not too young to be in office, and we need to, shift this terrain dramatically. But young people are so articulate about the fact that their marginalization and exclusion is in all dimensions of their lives, that this is about gender, it's about education, it's about economic access and power, it's about integration, social, cultural, the rights realization gap. And so actually there's a really powerful message here, which is that rebuilding the social contract has to be not just about the formality of civil and political rights, but re-navigating the issues of social justice, inequality, and access through all of these arenas of young people's lives. I think that that's a really important challenge. I think that's the way in which we don't have to worry so much about the language of the social contract, but start seeing the kind of the resourceful, creative resilience of young peace builders as reshaping our field.
And this also points you're raising are relating to yet another question that was about I'm reading it as a matter of intersectionality. The matter of how that different identities that are added to the fact that someone is a young person, again, related to some of the part of our conversation, different cultural contexts, then barriers are multiplying. And in that sense, I think it's really important that we are not just seeing it as a structural thing, institutional thing, but that we need to understand and engage in the complexity of the social dynamics and relationships, norms, ideas about aspects of identity. What we are kind of reading or reading into different aspects of identity and how that factors in.
To speak to that and kind of touching on the relationship between donor countries and its efforts to support youth peace and security and forwarding youth inclusion, is that oftentimes the people that are reached in non-English speaking, especially countries, are people like myself, people who have grown up outside of Japan, who have been educated in a Western education, who have the ability, the financial capability to be able to move around freely and speak in the language of donor countries. And so how do we go beyond that? How do we really put in the work to speak to in a sense, the actual people that we really need to listen to be able to understand how do we bring a country to a more peaceful place? How do we really include the youth of that country to be a part of these kind of peace processes? And that takes time, but it's definitely the work that needs to be done if we're really, really honest about what it takes. Yeah. And that is where all of these intersections come together, and those are the people that we need to talk to, not necessarily people like myself.
Young people. It was amazing when we were, consulting with young people, and with the best intentions of the world, we said this consultative process has to get young people who are hard to reach. And young people were very quick to say to us, "We're not hard to reach. You're just terrible at listening." And the kind of the emphasis, even with the UN in that instance, of having to push the institution a little bit kicking and screaming beyond the conversations with those who have the right language skills, who have the right passports, to make sure that we spoke to young combatants, to make sure we spoke to young indigenous women, to make sure that we spoke to second-generation migrants in the neighborhoods of Stockholm or gang members in the south side of Chicago, that diversity of access, that diversity of voice is absolutely imperative.
Yeah. It's there's also a comment building on or reflecting, I would say, on the social contract versus community and community dynamics and community relations and your call, Graeme, to think beyond like institutional structures, but to understand societal dynamic. But yet there are still aspects that are. And here one brought like taxation, paying taxes, part of like obligations and how we are part of society and our roles and responsibilities. But yet, here what I'm hearing is like the emphasis on actually the social dynamics, the so how those then get brought together or brought into peace.
Just to also highlight part of, I hope this answers this specifically. I wrote really what brought me to attention from the program itself, also like the example of the Minassa platform, which is really highlighting also these types of dynamics from the ground. It's really interesting to hear that this is part of this programming, for example. Same with the UNOY, same with PAX, same with KPSLR. Trying to also create this type of accessibility and reach. I think this brings this type of connection and the linkage between the two, which is really important to include that in our programming in a way that allows these voices to be heard. And also to add on the previous point concerning the language specifically, I think the use of art is sorry for also bringing up back that point. So, the use of art is also part of this, giving away a tool, a language that's accessible to everyone, that's understandable by everyone. So through a short film, you can create visuals that are really reaching everyone. Everyone can understand it. Music, same with the music, same with the photography. And just to bring that up, we have a photography exhibition outside for those who would be interested to also see, to understand also the context of Lebanon and the dynamics, which is in the main hall. So just to invite everyone to see that.
Yeah, thanks for bringing those photos across. And then just to mention into that, there are actually two different exhibitions. One was brought by Vera, a set of photos, and another by a group of Not One More on the protests in Britain. So to see also from different contexts, photography and creative captures of moments of struggles. Being mindful of time, towards wrapping up this exciting conversation, it feels we could go on and on, but then just thinking of then what can we draw out as maybe puzzling questions to pose for the rest of the day, or some implications for our future work?
So more participatory approach and listening, more listening to the ground, just to be mindful of time. Sorry.
I would stress the importance of process itself, of when including young people, when trying to include more diverse people for a goal of, I don't know, conflict resolution. The process itself, in which you might not be able to get the qualitative or quantitative results, itself is the real process in which peace is built. And so I really encourage us to really take time on those things and to be patient with it. Use creative approaches during those processes so that inclusion itself, that process itself, can be a way to building more peace with diverse people in this world. And so I think I don't know if it answers your question necessarily, but I would like people to think about what's the process behind what we're doing and how can we make it more inclusive.
I guess for me the one issue is in our conversations about security and rule of law to make sure we don't see young people as the objects of the exercise rather than the agents within it. The second is that we don't demonize young people and treat securitization of the sector a discourse which is constantly returned to, despite all the rhetoric in the policy world of young people's meaningful inclusion. The real danger is that they're the objects of the exercise and are seen as a threat, that we see them as all potential terrorists and etc. But if not demonizing young people is one dimension of this, we also have to be really careful of romanticizing them, not seeing that young people are a microcosm of society and are therefore diverse. We need to understand that autocracy and populism is something that young people can hold on to. In fact, I think when we talk about resilience and investing in resilience, we need to see it not just as about these are amazing people who can do amazing things with very little. Yeah, and that abdicates the responsibility of states, donors, the international community to resource and invest in them effectively. That resilience is not about survivalism, it's about a transformative approach to this. And I think that there's a really important recognition that if we don't invest in the upside, if we don't invest in the virtuous cycle that young people offer us for creative change, if we don't stop being frightened of their protest and dissent but see it as an asset, there is a real danger that they will creatively forge alternative places of belonging. There is a less virtuous cycle. And so the tactical issue for our community is to recognize what investment in the upside looks like.
Thank you. Any final thoughts? More, Vera?
Just thank you for making our voices heard. This is in itself a really important indicator as well of how voices can really reach places. So thank you for that. And I think, the most important part of it is making voices really heard. So thank you.
Yeah.
I'd like to echo thanks to everyone here and also for organizing this wonderful panel. It's been wonderful to be part of. Yeah.
I just, having talked to these two young peace-building leaders, I'm inspired by their stories and by their engagements, and so I'm just really grateful for having been able to be on this platform with them.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
I was very grateful for being with all three of you today here, very much inspired. I hope this was also inspiring for the audience, and that it will provide some food for thought and for further engagement in the exciting sessions that are coming up. So following this opening, we have 5 sessions that people present here have that advantage of being able to join any of these 5. People joining us online have 3 options to choose from. And as in the program said, we are starting with reinventing. We are very excited to have even 2 of these sessions, basically led and anchored by students from different universities with, yes, again, different perspectives and lived experiences. Apart from that, engagement-wise, for those here in the Lam Museum, there are different ways to engage, to creatively construct the way of social contract, how you feel or experience social contract, to construct sentences with buttons you got in your bags, to leave comments. So please do engage throughout the day through different means. But also another thing that I would like to maybe flag to you, we are, apart from the survey that we'll ask you at the end of the day to fill, but there are some questions to reflect on the conference, but there is also one of the loyal members of our community, Vassal, is part of the evaluation effort. So when Vassal, can you maybe stand up so people know who I'm talking about? Thank you, Vassal, for joining us again. And so Vassal will be running a short conversation, so if he approaches you and engages with you, it's not just his genuine curiosity, it's also for gaining insights into how these conferences can be even better and more exciting. Thank you for being with us in this opening, and have an exciting day. Enjoy. Thanks.